Before the hurricane, there was an anniversary.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Yeah, you're reminded about how crazy the news cycle can be, how fast changing it is, right? So the hurricane, which at press time, for those of you who watch regularly, you know that we record this program on Thursday afternoon, early afternoon. At press time, other than, and we don't want to minimize it, those awful fatalities on the East Coast from the tornadoes that came from the hurricane, it seems that the fatality count is at a low or no number, which is, God bless, perhaps all the preview and FEMA work and government warnings and local work done in Florida helped to save the day, and people were smart about that. We're not here to cover the hurricane because earlier in the week we scheduled our guest because of the poignancy of the week. And you may just have forgotten that last Monday, this past Monday, 3 days from where we're recording and 4 or 5 days from how you're seeing this show, the world had an important date to mark. Here's a headline that indicates, that's a bad cue on my part. Here's a headline that indicates that Rhode Island communities here were marking it, and here's how a very important event Monday night went.
Jewish Alliance of Greater Rhode Island is hosting an evening of remembrance Monday night to honor the lives lost last October 7th when Hamas attacked Israel.
To really commemorate loss, but also to really be in community, to understand that we're still here and we're still here together.
Several groups, including Brown University Students for Justice in Palestine, held a rally in Providence over the weekend in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
After a year of genocide, after 40,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been murdered, and now as Israel's violence spreads to Lebanon, we're here to call attention to that violence.
President Joe Biden released a statement Monday marking the anniversary of the start of the war, saying in part, quote, "We will not stop working to achieve a ceasefire deal in Gaza that brings the hostages home, allows for a surge in humanitarian aid to ease the suffering on the ground, assures Israel's security, and ends this war." Similar sentiments from members of Rhode Island's congressional delegation.
We recognize the suffering of the Israeli people, but we also, I think, recognize the suffering has been widespread at this point, and steps we can take to reduce the violence, to develop a stable relationship with all the countries in that region are important now as they ever have been.
Yeah, I guess so, but easier said than done for that stabilization at all. You saw Adam in that story. Adam Greenman is the president and CEO of the Jewish Alliance. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
You always come with these days. You come, and on the radio as well. You come when it's, I don't know, tragic, incredibly important. Will there be a time, you think, when we just have a casual conversation about Jewish holidays or something like that?
I hope so. I know I said to you on the radio the other day, our community is stuck in this place between the oi and the joy. And it seems like most of the time when I'm talking to you and others in the media, it's for the oi and not the joy. And so we look forward to those days when we can be talking about joyous things instead of the oi.
Reflection on the week? I mean, listen, a natural disaster is a natural disaster.
Yeah.
But I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? The wave of feeling and reaction to the anniversary date on October 7th, this past Monday, is somewhat stymied by the news cycle of.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about that.
No, not at all.
Is that a plus or a minus for you?
You know, it's at this point, I think that it's a minus, and I say that because the Jewish community, going back even further than the last year, but certainly over the last year, has felt a bit isolated. And Monday night was this opportunity for us all to come together. And I know that a lot of folks outside of the Jewish community reached out to me on October 7th to just check in, how am I doing, everything else. And that was incredibly nice and fulfilling. And really, I think the community needed that. And when the page turns so quickly, the community is still here. The community is still struggling, and when the news cycle changes so frequently, and again, it's not to dismiss or discount the very real and important news around the hurricane, and we certainly have friends and colleagues that are in that area and glad that they've made it out okay. But it is, our Jewish community continues to hurt even a year later.
I mentioned this to you on the radio, I saw an interview on CNN where a pretty high-profile family member of a hostage, unfortunately, hostage family, including a toddler, 3 of them, still unaccounted for, in Gaza somewhere, you hope.
Yeah.
Healthy, you hope. Was asked, what does this anniversary mean to you? And he was respectful, but obstinate over the idea that the date was meaningless, that they've been experiencing October 7th for 365 days.
Exactly. My remarks on Monday night at the vigil we had at the Jewish Alliance, I said the exact same thing. We were there to mark a dark day, but it's only one of 365 dark days that we've had since last October 7th, and I think that really is how the community feels and is feeling, and obviously everything that has happened since, the fact that there are still about 100 hostages that are being held, families, toddlers, and really a sense of hope that at some point a deal can be reached to free them, but also a sense of foreboding that this continues to go on, and a real, the further and further we get away from October 7th, 2023, the less and less realistic I think it becomes.
Well, do you think we could have a more complicated geopolitical problem? I mean, do you think we could? I mean, add in all the factors: the human suffering, Israel's September 11th, a military reaction that has caused tens of thousands of Gazans to lose their lives.
Yeah.
A multi-front war. It hasn't been defined as a war. We haven't coined it, named it, or numbered it at this point, but there's a war going on.
Yeah.
An American presidential election. The politics inside Israel. Netanyahu as to whether he, is a righteous prime minister now taking the reins and being most aggressive and completely, I'm sure, distracting from what has been some of his corruption issues, some internal debate inside that great democracy as to how the country ought to be run prior to the attacks, never mind the attacks now. Holy cow. You didn't capture it all in one night, I'm sure, talking about it and praying about it.
No.
Because it's too complicated.
It is incredibly complicated, and I think that word war, we don't like to use that term, but the truth is that, and I wasn't alive in 67 or 73 when Israel was attacked by multiple nations at the same time, but just in the last 2 weeks, you had the Houthis in Yemen firing rockets into Israel. You had Iran firing a barrage of missiles.
Almost
just a handful.
Right.
You've got folks in Lebanon, Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria firing rockets, and you've got the ongoing conflict in Gaza. Israel really is being attacked from all sides, and is doing its best to defend itself.
Others would say being way too aggressive in terms of maybe seizing the moment. I don't have a point of view on that. Sometimes I think it's okay just to be able to say, I'm watching, because I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure. I don't think the White House is sure, and I'm not sure that they have actually any kind of leverage over Netanyahu right now. We're not going to pull the dough, so we're going to hope that he runs this thing out in the right way. Obviously, they're on him all the time to be judicious, but he's got rationale and good reason to take out the 2 top leaders from Hezbollah.
Right.
He's got rationale for just about everything that he does. You could argue the rationale, but he's got the rationale.
Right.
So
we've, it's, I think I've said this to you on the show before, when you were in Israel, and I was standing at one point at the border of Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, you you can't experience that in the United States. We have two giant borders with relatively friendly allies on each, and it's just such a different experience. And I think to Israelis, to the Israeli people, this is existential. Their survival, they really do feel that their survival is at risk. And just last week, I was on a Zoom for work. We were listening to a presentation from somebody from our national organization who lives in Israel, and she gets an alert on her phone, and she just ran right off screen, said, "Excuse me, I have to go," left the Zoom on. It was a
meeting in Tel Aviv, maybe.
She lived in Jerusalem, and she got the notice that the missiles were coming, and it was a harrowing moment for all of us that were on that Zoom, worried about her personal safety, but a reminder that that's not something we experience here in this country. That's something that they experience on a, depending on what part of Israel you're in, you could be experiencing that on a, multi times a week, and so it's very hard. And we talk all the time, and I think as I talk to people in the Jewish community here in Rhode Island, there's real concern for the loss of innocent Palestinian life, and we talk all the time in our community about that and preserving human life and how important that is. But it's also equally important that Israel have the right to defend itself, that Israel have the right to prosecute a war against those who are seeking to destroy them.
So I want to talk about what it is like to be a Jewish American right now, just trying to live your everyday life, and what level of normalcy you actually feel. We'll talk about that, and of course, it happens to be a special time in the Jewish calendar, no doubt. So more on that when we come back. Stay with us. So the president, marking the importance of the week. So the Jewish New Year celebrated earlier the week or last week with Rosh Hashanah. Is it Shana Tova?
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Happy New Year to
yes.
you. And I've always been kind of confused about. Is Rosh Hashanah always in front of Yom Kippur?
It is, yeah. So Rosh Hashanah.
Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement.
Day of Atonement. Yeah.
It seems to me that, I don't know, a Catholic kid, I'd rather go to confession, get that whole thing done, and then go ahead and celebrate.
So interestingly enough, according to Jewish tradition,
I don't mean to be disrespectful.
No, not disrespectful at all.
I'm just kind of curious as to why those two things
I
are.
actually appreciate getting the chance to explain a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's Yom Kippur is all about the Book of Life, that you're inscribed into the Book of Life for another year. And they say that on Rosh Hashanah, at the beginning of the new year, that's when the book is opened. That's when God starts, opens the book, and that you're not truly inscribed into the Book of Life until Yom Kippur. So the time between the two, these 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is the 10 days of reflection, 10 days of repentance, 10 days of really asking for forgiveness from others. And then on Yom Kippur, we ask for forgiveness from God and ask to be inscribed in the Book of Life for another year. So
gotcha.
It's an opportunity to celebrate the new year. And then, really it's a 10-day celebration of the new year. And then, at the end of Yom Kippur, is when we really sort of wipe the slate clean and start anew.
The Jewish calendar is, I don't know if the word would be dominated, but emphasized. Historical events are an emphasis in observations.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about sometimes historic events. Passover, for heaven's sakes, we're talking about the Exodus, for crying out loud.
Exactly.
And historians and theologians can debate as to whether the Old Testament is epic history or true, and the whole, we don't. You got 12 television show time that we could get into that whole thing and have some fun with that.
We have big debates in the Jewish community all about that stuff.
Right? Yeah. So and should. But it almost feels as if right now, what's going on right now could be the basis for, I don't know, a remodeled or reborn Jewish observance / holiday 100 years from now, 200 years from now. It almost doesn't it feel that compelling?
I think that October 7th is absolutely one of those moments, and we've seen that unfortunately in the last 80 years. Added to the Jewish calendar is the commemoration of Yom HaShoah, the commemoration of the Holocaust that happens in the spring. Hanukkah, people don't realize, is a the over it's the catch-all for all of the other tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people. Yeah, and so, I absolutely think that 100 years from now, the Jewish community will certainly still be reflecting on October 7th. The irony is that on the Jewish calendar, October 7th last year happened on a Jewish holiday. Actually, one of our more joyous Jewish holidays, the day where you finish reading the Torah and then you start reading it all over again. It's called Simchat Torah. And so the fact that, that is one of our real joyous holidays now also has this negative connotation with it as well.
So put it all into perspective during this week. Is it able to be put into context and perspective between these two important observances?
It's, I think, in our community, we've been reflecting quite a bit. This is a time for reflection. It's a time of looking back, and so it's impossible in this last year to look back and not have the events of October 7th, everything that's happened since, both the things happening in Israel and the rise in anti-Semitism here in the United States, and seeing the conversations and protests happening on college campuses, everything. It's really all come to a head in conversations within our community over the last week. And I think that what we've seen is that people don't necessarily have answers, but when we had about 550 people gather at the JCC on Monday night, and I think what we found was that what people are really craving right now is to be together in community, that it's impossible to process this alone. And so being there with other people, being connected to other people, both the Jewish community members who came, and it was overwhelmingly Jewish community members, but it wasn't only Jewish community members. Other folks from the community came out and joined us and stood in solidarity with us, and being reminded that even in our darkest of times, we have each other, we have a community. There's a phrase that's been around for a long time, but was popularized during the Holocaust. Actually, our Holocaust memorial at the JCC, on it says, Am Yisrael Chai, which just means the people of Israel live. For better or worse, that has become a rallying cry for our community over the last year.
So when I ask about what it's like to be an American Jew, we'll kind of spend a few minutes on that. Let's not forget that prior to this October 7th, a year ago, there was a percolating anti-Semitism that was a serious conversation in this country. So we'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. I don't know. It's kind of a weird question to ask, but I've asked it of you before. What's it like to be Jewish these days? I think it's a fair, simple question, though.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think that on the one hand, we really are surrounded by, within our own community, there's just a ton of joy. And within Rhode Island's Jewish community in particular, the community is growing. We come together to celebrate births and bar and bat mitzvahs. My own daughter's bat mitzvahs in a couple of weeks. And so you have these incredible, thank you. Yeah. We have these incredibly joyous occasions that we come together for. And yet sitting on top of that is everything else that's happening to the Jewish people. And not just the October 7th stuff, but rising anti-Semitism more broadly in this country. And I think what people really don't grasp when it comes to anti-Semitism is this isn't a right-left issue. You see it on both the far right and the far left. You see this horseshoe almost of what unites these two is anti-Semitism for different reasons. And that's really concerning. Safety is a concern, and just the overwhelming feeling that we're isolated from everybody else.
Well, listen, you're running an organization that is, focused on your ethnicity and your religion. You've had other jobs in your life, and you're just a normal, regular guy who I enjoy talking to. your Jewishness does not come into my consciousness if we were going to a ball game or if we were talking politics. Well, it depends on what intersects there. But I mean, just the kids are playing soccer. So
that's interesting because
but I am not Jewish,
right?
So I don't know what you're carrying.
I think one of the things we have to carry, unfortunately, is this. Most of our interactions are like that, but there are often times, and I've heard from community members where when somebody finds out that you're Jewish, they have all these questions and they make all these assumptions about your views related to politics or Israel or
like being
right Jewish. They jump right in, and there's a feeling that you have to
answer for it.
That you have to answer for.
Don't mean to answer your answer, but that's what it feels like.
That's what it feels like. That's exactly what it feels like. That you have to answer for it, and that's really hard to describe. And Jews, I think people also forget that Judaism is an ethnicity, it's a culture, it's a religion, and so Jews come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, races, points of view, and there's this assumption that we're this monolith that is what is born out of so many anti-Semitic tropes.
It used to be when it didn't feel like so much strife. A different holiday calendar would be the only thing that actually, humanly differentiated you or Stacy, my producer.
I celebrated Hanukkah.
I was like, oh, Jews, you got to take that day off because you got Rosh Hashanah. Got it. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was just kind of a computation.
Yeah.
Now, the questions, I guess, get much deeper.
Much deeper, and
30
not
seconds
everybody
on that whole matter.
Yeah, not everybody wants to answer them. Some of them just want to go to the ball game. Some of them just want to have conversations.
Can you leave me alone just because I'm Jewish, right?
Yeah, we're Jewish, but that's one part of our identity, and it's it definitely makes things more complicated, and it's definitely gotten more complicated over the last couple of years.
10 seconds on where we go from here.
I think it's continuing to come together in our Jewish community, continuing to, accept warmth from other communities, and grateful for opportunities like this to get to talk about it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Hang in there.
Yeah.
Be right back. Hey, in addition to the craziness of the election season, we got some important bond questions here in Rhode Island, and I think we'll probably pay attention to them over the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. See you on the radio as well on WPRI weekdays at 3. Thanks for tuning in.